Okay, our first step, I kind of have some jars picked out from my stash. I'm going to do one technique with these, and then my other jars, I'm going to do a different technique with those. So I'm going to start out with some Mod Podge, and I'm just going to coat, let me take these lids off of these jars. I'm going to coat the jars with Mod Podge first. Okay. I'll just start with this one. And some of these jars, like the labels, you know, they're still a little bit sticky from the label that was on them. But with this, the technique that we're going to be doing today, with these, it's not going to interfere, you know, with some stickiness, some glue residue still being on that jar. Now I'm just taking my paintbrush and dipping it into my coffee grunge and brushing around the labels, and that just softens the paper where I can just go and tear out those labels instead of using scissors to cut them out. Just having that feathered edge, that torn edge, instead of having that freshly cut edge. I just think the torn edge is just more primitive looking and just gives it more of a vintage look. And there where the edge of the paper was, I just went and did the same thing, wet the edge and then just tore little pieces. And then I simply just placed it onto my jar in that Mod Podge. Okay, I'm just going to coat that coffee on that jar. Y'all, this is a very messy project. Just FYI. And I want that coffee to stick to that Mod Podge. And you can just kind of roll your jar also in there, but some places you just have to kind of, you know, sprinkle it on there yourself, especially around that label, and kind of gently press just to give it an extra stick. Okay. Okay. I'm going to kind of wipe that label off. I don't mind a little bit of this mixture getting on my label, but I don't want a lot because I don't want to cover that label up. Okay, so now I'm going to take my coffee grunge mix. I need to get me a paintbrush for that. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. Trying to find me a brush. Okay, and I just take that coffee grunge mix and I just kind of dab it over that instant coffee that's on my jar. And you want to be careful not to let that run over your label. So I try to keep mine, you know, label up, your label facing up. So if any of it tries to run, you know, it will run away from your label. And you know, you can tell when those coffee grounds get good and coated, it sort of makes like a gunk, like a sticky, gooey gunk. It almost looks like honey, like after it starts, what's it called? I can't think of what it's called when honey's crystallizing. When it starts crystallizing, that's sort of what it looks like. Just coat it all over this jar. And I'm going to take my blow dryer. Hang on, guys. Okay. I had to fix my camera. And I just apply that heat all over that jar. And like I say, I leave that label up because that stuff will start running. And you don't want it to run over your label because it will stain it. And, you know, you could still get by with it if it did get on your label because that would give it more of a primitive look. So I mean, you could get by with it, but for the sake of, you know, it being your decor, I try not to get it on that label. And some people like it on the label, so it's whatever, you know, you would rather have. And y'all, this is very messy. It drips while you blow dry it. So you want to try to hold it over your workspace. Take my coffee grunge mix and I'm just going to brush over the label just to give it more of a vintage look. I'm not going to do them all like that, but I do like to have a variety, you know, with the different labels, because these labels are printed on like the antique paper anyway, so they already have a vintage look. But some of these I'm still just going to brush some of that coffee grunge right over them just to make it a little bit darker, and it just kind of blends it into the primitive jar, you know, also. So guys, this is our second jar, and I'm just going to continue doing this technique with our other jars. I think I'm going to do 4 more just like this, and then we're going to do some a little different with a painting technique. Okay, before we go on to our next technique, I have several of these candles that I thrifted. They are battery operated, and they come with these little plastic stand. So I'm going to do that same technique with these. I'm going to start with the candle, and same way with the jars, I'm going to apply the Mod Podge over it. I'm going to leave this little part at the bottom because that's the part that sticks into the little candle holder. And we are going to put a little bit on our flame, so I'm going to brush a little bit onto that as well. Okay, then I'm going to coat over that and just sprinkle some of that, the instant coffee over that Mod Podge. And just like with the jars, you sprinkle that instant coffee over and then pat it in with your coffee grunge. You can add as many coats as you need to in doing this. After you get the look you are wanting, then you just apply heat with your heating tool or your blow dryer. And look at that before and after. For our next technique, I'm going to do a few of our jars. I'm just going to start with coating them with black chalk paint. This is the color Ink in the Waverly, and I'm just going over them really quick with this coat of black paint, and I'll probably just do 1 coat because the technique that we're going to be doing, 1 coat should be just fine. So I just chose 3 of my jars, different sizes, different shapes. They're going to kind of go together, but they don't have to go together. After that black paint dries, I go over my jar with Mod Podge and just coat it really well. Next, I have these other labels that I printed off of Etsy. And now some of these I cut out with my scissors, and some of them I did the feathering technique. I applied the label, Mod Podged over that, and then I sat it to the side to dry. And now I'm just repeating this technique to the other jars. As you can see, I'm doing a good coat of that Mod Podge. I'm not putting it on very thin. It's a pretty good layer. And see, with this label, I did that feathering technique that we did on the other jars. And just pressing that label in. And now for our cute crock jar that we made, I'm using this crow label on it. After that dried really well, now I'm going over that with the color Mineral in the Waverly. And I just go and paint a full coat all over the jar, around the label, of course. And I end up doing 2 coats of this color. Carefully going around that label. And to me, I mean, to each his own, but I just feel when you paint around the label, it just sort of helps that label look like it's made into the jar versus just put on top of the jar. I don't know, maybe that's just me. While that second coat of paint was still wet, I sprinkled in some cinnamon, and I just patted that cinnamon in. And then I went with that coffee grunge and brushed over the label to give it more of a vintage look. With our crock, I added some cute florals to match our label. And then for this one, I wanted to put the lid back on. I did chalk paint that lid black, and then I sprinkled cinnamon over that. With this one, I'm just using burlap strips to cover the top. And then I tied around that with some jute string to hold it in place. I end up taking some ribbon strips and creating a cute bow to go on the front of that jar. And I decided to just wrap some jute string around that rim as well. And there's our cute bow on that one. Look how cute that is, guys. For this one, I decided to make a tag to go with it. I had these cute primitive labels I purchased off of Etsy. I took one of those cardboard tags from Amazon and Mod Podged that crow image onto it to match. And guys, how cute did these turn out? I absolutely love how they pair so well together. And they're so primitive looking. To embellish these, I simply took some burlap over some of them and just tied with that jute string like we did the other jar. And with some of them, I painted those lids and just tied some jute string in a bow and embellished with buttons and ribbon pieces. Hot glued that in place. I also used some raffia to make some bows. For our candles we did, I just have this basket that I had on hand. I've already just hot glued that candle in the center, and I just have some strips of burlap I've cut to fit my basket, and I'm going to place those in there to sort of line it. And I just think also that burlap just adds a really pretty touch to a basket and an arrangement. And I'm just going to fill it with some greenery pieces and some pumpkins, and we'll have a cute little arrangement. And also I had the little cardboard tags from Amazon, and then I just Mod Podged an image that I purchased off of Etsy, and I've already attached that tag onto my basket. So this is just a cute little way you can display these pretty primitive candles. You can add them to an arrangement, and they're also just pretty by themselves. And of course, they're very pretty with those jars that we did.